Imagine a country tucked away in the very heart of Europe. For centuries it was almost invisible on maps, its name whispered rather than declared. This was Slovakia. It was a land of stunning mountains and deep valleys, but its story was often told by others. Its people lived under the rule of powerful neighbors, their own culture a flickering candle in a great storm. It was a place you might pass through on your way to somewhere else. A footnote in the grand histories of empires. But, history has a funny way of surprising us. The quiet voices can, over time, grow into a powerful chorus. And that is precisely what happened here. This is the story of how Slovakia stepped out of the long shadows of history. It's a tale of resilience, of a people who clung to their language, their traditions, and their identity against incredible odds. Think of it as a historical detective story. We'll follow the clues left behind in ancient settlements, in folk songs passed down through generations, and in the passionate writings of poets and patriots. We'll see how a nation was almost erased, only to re-emerge, stronger and more determined. Slovakia's journey is not just about drawing new borders on a map. It's about a people finding their voice and learning to sing their own song loud and clear for all the world to hear. The transformation is quite remarkable when you stop to think about it. From a subordinate region within larger states to a confident, independent republic, Slovakia's path was anything but straightforward. It was a roller coaster of hope and heartbreak, of brief moments of freedom followed by long periods of suppression. We will explore the grand palaces of Vienna and Budapest, where decisions were made that shaped Slovak lives, but more importantly, we will venture into the small villages and towns where the true spirit of Slovakia was kept alive. It was here, around family hearths and in clandestine meetings, that the dream of a nation was nurtured. Today, Slovakia is a member of the European Union, its flag flying proudly alongside those of its neighbors. Its cities, like the vibrant capital Bratislava, are buzzing with energy and innovation. It has become a symbol of how a small nation can carve out its own destiny through peace and determination. But to truly understand the Slovakia of 2025, we must wind back the clock. We must journey back through time, peel back the layers of empire and ideology, and discover the deep historical roots that made this incredible transformation possible. It is a story of survival, a testament to the enduring power of culture, and the unshakable human desire for a place to call home. Our story begins long, long ago, when the mists of time were thick over Central Europe. Long before kings and empires drew their rigid lines across the land, Slavic tribes began to settle in the fertile plains and wooded hills of what we now call Slovakia. They arrived around the 5th and 6th centuries, building simple wooden settlements and farming the rich soil. These were the ancestors of the Slovaks. They were a people connected to the land, their lives governed by the changing seasons. We can almost picture them, gathered around fires, sharing stories and forging the very earliest forms of a shared culture. Their language the ancient root from which modern Slovak would one day grow. Then, something extraordinary happened. In the 9th century, these scattered tribes came together to form one of the first major Slavic states in history, Great Moravia. This was a hugely significant moment. For the first time, the ancestors of the Slovaks and their Czech cousins were united under a single, powerful entity. Great Moravia was a major player on the European stage, a sophisticated kingdom that held its own against the mighty Frankish Empire to the west. Its rulers, like the legendary Prince Rastislav, were clever diplomats and ambitious leaders. They understood that to survive, their new state needed a strong identity, something to bind its people together. This is where two very important figures enter our story, the Byzantine missionary brothers, Cyril and Methodius. In the year 863, they arrived in Great Moravia at Rastislav's invitation. Their mission was revolutionary. They didn't just want to spread Christianity, they wanted to do it in a language the people could understand. So they created a new script, the Glagolitic alphabet, and translated the Holy Scriptures into Old Church Slavonic. This was a masterstroke. It gave the Slavs their own written language for the first time, elevating their culture and giving them a powerful tool for education and administration. It was a declaration of cultural independence. Sadly, the golden age of Great Moravia was not to last. Internal conflicts and constant pressure from outside forces, particularly the Magyar tribes sweeping in from the east, began to weaken the state. By the early 10th century, the Great Kingdom had crumbled, its territory divided among its neighbors. but its legacy was profound and enduring. For the Slovak people, Great Moravia became a cherished memory, a historical touchstone. It was a reminder that they had once been part of a great and independent state. This memory would be passed down through the centuries, a seed of national consciousness, waiting for the right conditions to sprout once more. After the fall of Great Moravia, the Slovak lands were absorbed into a new and powerful state, the Kingdom of Hungary. This was the beginning of a very, very long chapter in Slovak history. We are not talking about a few decades or even a century. For nearly 1,000 years, from the 10th century right up until 1918, the Slovaks lived as subjects of the Hungarian crown. This long period of foreign rule would profoundly shape every aspect of their existence, from their politics and economy to their very sense of self. The Slovaks became a people without their own state, a minority within a larger multi-ethnic kingdom. Life under Hungarian rule was a complex affair. For much of this time, the ruling class was made up of Hungarian nobles. They owned the land, held the positions of power, and set the cultural tone. Slovak peasants worked the fields, their lives largely unchanged for centuries. Yet, despite the lack of a formal state, a distinct Slovak culture continued to develop. It lived on in the villages, in the unique dialects spoken in different valleys, in the colorful folk costumes, and in the rich tradition of songs and fairy tales. This was a quiet, grassroots form of identity, preserved not in grand palaces but in the hearts and homes of ordinary people. However, this cultural survival faced growing threats. Over the centuries, and especially in the 19th century, the Hungarian authorities began to pursue a policy of Magyarization. This was a deliberate attempt to assimilate non-Hungarian peoples into the dominant culture. The Hungarian language was promoted as the sole language of government, education, and public life. Slovak schools were closed, and using the Slovak language could be seen as an act of defiance. It was a systematic effort to erase the Slovak identity, to persuade people that the path to success and modernity lay in becoming Hungarian. This was a moment of existential crisis for the Slovaks. This pressure had a powerful, if unintended, effect. Instead of disappearing, the Slovak identity began to harden in resistance. A small but dedicated group of Slovak intellectuals, priests, teachers, and writers fought back. They understood that their language was the very soul of their nation. People like Ludovic Stur worked tirelessly to codify a standard Slovak literary language in the 1840s, giving the people a powerful unifying tool. They collected folk tales and wrote poetry and articles in Slovak, creating a body of literature that celebrated their heritage. This cultural awakening was a brave act of defiance, a declaration that the Slovaks would not be silenced. The 19th century was an age of great change across Europe. The air was thick with new ideas about nations, peoples, and the right to self-determination. This wave of nationalism, which had shaken France and inspired Germans and Italians to unite, eventually washed over the vast Austro-Hungarian Empire. For the many different ethnic groups living under the rule of Vienna and Budapest, it was a time of awakening. The Slovaks, who had been quietly nurturing their culture for so long, began to think bigger. They started to dream not just of cultural survival but of political recognition. It was a slow and difficult process, but the seeds of a modern nation were being sown. Within the empire, the Slovaks faced a unique challenge. In 1867, a political compromise known as the Ausgleich created the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary. This gave Hungarians almost equal status with the Austrians, and it put the Hungarian government in firm control of the Slovak lands. This was terrible news for the Slovaks. The newly empowered Hungarian leadership intensified its policies of Magyarization, viewing any sign of Slovak nationalism as a threat to the unity of their kingdom. The few Slovak-language secondary schools were shut down, and the Matica Slovenska, a vital cultural institution, was forcibly closed. It really seemed as if the flickering candle of Slovak identity was about to be snuffed out for good. But repression often breeds resistance. The more the authorities tried to suppress Slovak culture, the more precious it became to the people. A new generation of leaders emerged, building on the work of pioneers like Ludovic Stur. They organized themselves politically, forming the Slovak National Party to advocate for their rights, however limited. They published newspapers and journals, often facing censorship and persecution, to keep the national spirit alive. They also looked outwards for support, building connections with other Slavic peoples, particularly their close linguistic and cultural cousins, the Czechs. This shared Slavic identity became a source of strength and solidarity in a hostile environment. This period was crucial for forging the modern Slovak nation. It was a time of immense hardship, but it was also a time of incredible creativity and courage. The struggle for their language and culture gave the Slovaks a common cause and a shared story of persecution and perseverance. They were no longer just a collection of people living in the northern counties of Hungary. They were becoming a self-aware nation with political aspirations. The dream of autonomy, perhaps even independence, was still distant and dangerous. But the fuse had been lit. The stage was being set for the dramatic events of the 20th century, which would finally shatter the old imperial order. The First World War was a cataclysm that tore the old map of Europe to shreds. For the Slovaks, the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1918 was a moment of astonishing opportunity. After 1,000 years, Hungarian rule was finally over, but what would come next? Independence seemed a daunting prospect for a small nation with little experience of self-government. Instead, Slovak leaders chose to join forces with their Czech neighbors. Together, they founded a new democratic republic, Czechoslovakia. It was a bold and hopeful experiment, uniting two closely related peoples in a shared state. For the first time, Slovak was an official language, and Slovaks could participate in their own governance. This new state brought enormous benefits. For the first time in centuries, Slovak culture could flourish freely. Schools were opened, theaters were established, and a Slovak university was founded in Bratislava. The industrial and political expertise of the more developed Czech lands helped to modernize Slovakia's economy and administration. In many ways, the First Republic of Czechoslovakia was a beacon of democracy and progress in a Europe increasingly darkened by extremism. Slovaks and Czechs were, officially, equal partners in this new venture, a brotherhood of nations who had thrown off the imperial yoke together. It was a dream come true for many. However, the reality of the shared house was more complicated. The partnership was not always equal. The Czechs were more numerous, wealthier, and had a stronger tradition of political independence. The central government in Prague often made decisions that seemed to ignore Slovak interests. A controversial theory of Czechoslovakism was promoted, which argued that Czechs and Slovaks were not two separate nations, but rather two branches of a single Czechoslovak nation. This angered many Slovaks, who felt that their distinct identity, which they had fought so hard to preserve, was once again being undermined, this time by their supposed brothers. This tension created a deep political divide within Slovakia. While many Slovaks remained loyal to the Czechoslovak idea, a powerful autonomist movement grew, led by Andrej Hlinka's Slovak People's Party. They did not necessarily want to break up the country, but they demanded greater self-government for Slovakia within the republic. This internal struggle defined much of the interwar period. The Czechoslovak experiment was a huge step forward from Hungarian rule, but it fell short of fulfilling the national aspirations of many Slovaks. The shared house was strong, but its foundations were troubled by a persistent feeling of inequality and a divided heart. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 sent shockwaves across Eastern Europe, and Czechoslovakia was no exception. The Velvet Revolution, a series of massive, peaceful protests, brought an end to 41 years of communist rule in a matter of weeks. It was a moment of pure euphoria. The people had won, but as the joy settled, old questions resurfaced. With the common enemy of communism gone, the differences between Czechs and Slovaks came back into focus. The debate about the nature of their shared state, which had been suppressed for decades, returned with a vengeance. The hyphen war, a heated argument over whether the country should be called Czechoslovakia or Czechoslovakia, was a small but telling sign of the deeper divisions. The leaders who emerged from the Velvet Revolution, Václav Havel in the Czech lands, and Vladimir Mečiar in Slovakia, had very different visions for the future. Negotiations began to try and find a new arrangement that would satisfy both sides. The Slovaks, led by Mečiar, pushed for a looser confederation, one that would give Slovakia significant autonomy and international standing. They felt it was time for Slovakia to be an equal partner on the world stage. The Czechs, led by the more pragmatic Václav Klaus, were wary of a complex and potentially unstable arrangement. They came to believe that two fully separate and independent states would be a cleaner and more effective solution for everyone. What followed was truly remarkable, and stands as a shining example in modern history. Instead of descending into the conflict and violence that tragically engulfed other multi-ethnic states like Yugoslavia, the Czech and Slovak leaders chose a different path. They committed to a peaceful and orderly separation. The decision, made by politicians rather than a popular vote, was dubbed the Velvet Divorce. It was a testament to the maturity and pragmatism of both nations. There were no angry words, no threats, and no soldiers. There were just complex negotiations about how to divide federal assets, from army equipment to embassy buildings, in a fair and civilized manner. On the 1st of January 1993, the world awoke to find two new countries where one had been the day before. The Czechoslovak flag was lowered for the last time, and the new flags of the Czech Republic and the Slovak Republic were raised. It was a bittersweet moment for many, especially the older generation who had grown up with the idea of a united state. But it was also a moment of immense national pride for Slovaks. After more than a millennium of living under the rule of others, they were finally, indisputably, the masters of their own house. The long, winding journey out of the shadows had reached its destination. Slovakia was independent. Independence in 1993 was not an end, but a beginning. The early years were challenging. Slovakia had to build the institutions of a modern democratic state from scratch, all while transforming its economy from a centrally planned communist system to a free market. Under the sometimes controversial leadership of Vladimir Mečiar, the country's path towards Western integration seemed to stall. But the democratic spirit of the Slovak people proved resilient. They worked tirelessly to strengthen their institutions, ensure the rule of law, and align their country with the values of the European community. It was a period of intense nation-building, laying the foundations for the future. The hard work paid off. In 2004, a pivotal year, Slovakia achieved two of its major foreign policy goals. It joined both NATO, securing its place within the Western Security Alliance, and the European Union, anchoring its future in the family of European democracies. This was a monumental achievement. It marked the successful completion of Slovakia's transition and its full return to the European mainstream. Joining the EU opened up new markets, spurred economic growth, and brought investment that transformed the country. In 2009, Slovakia took another major step by adopting the euro, further cementing its integration into the heart of Europe. Today, Slovakia is a dynamic and successful modern nation. It has earned the nickname the Tatra Tiger for its impressive economic growth, becoming a major hub for the automotive industry and attracting international investment. Its cities are a vibrant blend of beautifully restored historical centers and sleek modern architecture. While political challenges remain as they do in any democracy, the country has established a stable and functioning political system. Its people enjoy the freedoms and opportunities that their parents and grandparents could only dream of. The once overlooked nation has truly found its footing on the European stage. In conclusion, Slovakia's journey is a powerful story of national perseverance. From the ancient echoes of Great Moravia, through a millennium in the shadow of the Hungarian crown, and the complex Czechoslovak experiment, the Slovak people never lost sight of who they were. Their peaceful and dignified path to independence in the Velvet Divorce stands as a lesson to the world. Today, Slovakia is more than just a place on a map. It is a confident voice in Europe, a nation proud of its rich cultural heritage and optimistic about its future. It is the story of a people who, after centuries of waiting, finally got to write their own chapter in the great book of history.